My name is Anthony. I'm 35 years old, and I used to work as a forest ranger in a small state park in the Appalachian region. People think forest rangers live a calm, peaceful life among trees and wildlife. I did, most of the time, but I've learned that even the quietest forest can hide something dark, something that shouldn't exist. And if you've ever spent time in the woods alone, you know there's an edge to the silence. That edge is where I lost everything. I should probably start at the beginning before it all went wrong. I've been a ranger for almost 10 years. I loved the job, loved the solitude, loved the work that few people ever appreciated. I knew the trails, the wildlife, the way the forest changed with each season. People trusted me to patrol areas that were closed to the public, and for years nothing ever went wrong. Until one day I was asked to check a remote, abandoned part of the park. An area that had been closed for decades after a series of disappearances that were mostly forgotten. At first it seemed simple enough. The old ranger station had fallen into disrepair, and my supervisors wanted a report. Trail conditions, structural integrity, anything that might threaten wildlife or trespassers. I had been told to bring a team, but on short notice, I ended up going alone. Standard procedure would have been safer, but I insisted I could handle it. I thought I knew these woods like the back of my hand. That confidence would almost kill me. I arrived early in the morning. Mist clung to the trees, softening the edges of everything. The air was damp, smelling of wet pine and decay. I parked my truck on the old gravel road near the park boundary and double-checked my gear. Flashlight, compass, walkie-talkie, GPS, first aid kit, and a small notebook. I always carried a notebook. It was habit. I scribbled notes for every trip, for every strange observation. That habit would later feel like a lifeline. I remember the first step onto the trail vividly. The undergrowth was thick, almost like it had grown to deter visitors. The path was narrow and rocky, winding uphill toward the ridge where the old ranger station once stood. I remember feeling that faint unease, the kind you get when the wind doesn't rustle the leaves the way it should, when birds don't call in the morning, when everything is too quiet. I shrugged it off. I've always trusted my instincts, but that morning I ignored them. The first few hours were routine. I checked the trails, mapped fallen trees, and took note of the eroded sections of old paths. Nothing seemed out of place. I passed old signage, some leaning at odd angles, weathered almost to illegibility. One sign in particular caught my eye, paint flaking, nailed crookedly to a tree, restricted area, do not enter. That shouldn't have surprised me. I knew the boundaries, but it did. I remember thinking, who put this here? Didn't I check this trail last year? By midday, I reached the clearing where the old ranger cabin had once stood. Only the stone foundation remained, moss-covered and cracked. I circled it slowly, checking the remains for anything unusual. That's when I saw it, a small mound of disturbed soil in the corner of the clearing. At first, I thought it was just an animal's burrow. But something about it didn't feel right. The soil looked too fresh. I crouched, brushing the leaves aside. Nothing visible, but the ground felt wrong. My stomach knotted, the kind of knot that tells you to leave before it's too late. I shook my head, forcing myself to focus. It's nothing, I told myself. Rangers see weird things all the time. Fallen animals, abandoned traps, broken campsites. But as I stood, brushing dirt off my hands, I noticed something else. A faint footprint pressed into the soft earth just beyond the mound. Not an animal print. Not a human shoe. Barefoot. Small. Deliberately placed. My heart beat faster. I looked around. No one was there. The forest was still. That uneasy silence had returned. My rational mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe a trespasser? Hiker? Squatter? But the area had been closed for decades. And even if someone had made it out here, why leave footprints around a mound of dirt and vanish? I tried to shake it off and continued inspecting the area. I took photos, notes, circled the cabin remains, and moved to the ridge trail that led further into the forest. That's when the first sound hit me. It was faint at first, almost too quiet to notice. The snap of a branch. I froze. My training kicked in. I listened. Footsteps? Maybe. Or a deer. Or the wind. The forest whispered, rustled, shifted. I tried to rationalize it, but then I heard it again, closer, deliberate. Footsteps that didn't match mine following me. My pulse quickened and I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" Nothing. I took out my walkie-talkie, tried the GPS static. The devices buzzed, cut out, returned nothing. My rational mind started to crack. I retraced my steps back to the clearing, moving cautiously, every sense alert. And that's when I saw it, just for a fraction of a second beyond the trees. A figure. Pale, humanoid, but wrong. Too thin, limbs too long, standing perfectly still, watching me from the shadows. I blinked. It was gone. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Mist. Shadows. Fatigue. But the unease didn't leave. Not even close. I set up my small tent in the clearing, away from the foundation as the sun began to set. The forest darkened quickly, the mist thickened, and the air became colder than it should have been for early October. I lit a small lantern, double-checked my supplies and tried to keep calm. Night fell and the forest seemed to breathe around me. I couldn't hear animals, couldn't hear wind, but the silence was alive, heavy. And then came the whispering. At first I thought it was the wind through the trees. Then I realized it was words. My name. Anthony. Anthony. Soft, almost pleading, distant, coming from multiple directions at once. I grabbed my flashlight, sweeping it across the trees, but saw nothing. The whispers grew louder, circling me, teasing me, testing me. I wanted to run, but my training kept me in place. I had to observe, document, survive. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt wrong. My sense of direction faltered. Every tree looked the same, every shadow seemed to shift when I blinked. And then I heard laughter. Not human laughter. Hollow, echoing, high-pitched, but layered as if coming from dozens of throats. Panic set in. I packed my things as quickly as possible, abandoning my careful plan to stay put until morning. I ran, or at least tried to. Every step seemed heavier, the trail unfamiliar. Trees I knew were suddenly alien. Branches reached like hands, roots tripping me as if the forest itself wanted to trap me. I remember stumbling, falling, and catching myself on a tree. The whispering stopped. Silence. And then, just before I made it back to the clearing, a shadow moved in front of me. Wide, low, and impossibly fast. It disappeared before I could process it. I made it back to my tent, trembling, but found my supplies rearranged. My food bag opened, items scattered. My notebook, always with me, pages ripped out, scattered in the dirt. I tried to write, to document, but the pen wouldn't move. My hands shook too violently. I just sat there, trying to breathe, listening. By the time the sun rose, I was exhausted, drenched in sweat, and afraid to move. I packed quickly, determined to leave. The forest seemed different in daylight. Less hostile, but still wrong. I drove back to my truck, avoiding the trails I had marked the day before, taking the long way around. My mind refused to rationalize what had happened. I didn't tell anyone, not yet. My supervisors would have laughed it off, blamed exhaustion or imagination. But I knew what I had experienced was real. Something in that forest had watched me. It had toyed with me. And I didn't know if it had ever intended to let me leave. When I returned to work the following week, they told me I could have my old job back. Paperwork, evaluations, routine inspections. They wanted the Anthony they remembered. But I wasn't the same. I never will be. And though I returned to normal life outwardly, the memory of that night lingers. Even now, thinking about that clearing, that mound of dirt, the figure in the trees, I can feel the forest watching. I can hear faint whispers in the wind, just enough to remind me. Some parts of the woods are not meant for humans. And I am living proof of that truth. When I say the forest changed that night, I don't mean metaphorically. I mean it literally shifted around me. Trees that I remembered were gone, paths I had marked the day before no longer existed. I couldn't find the way back to my truck. Every step I took seemed to loop me deeper into the woods, circling the same twisted undergrowth, the same ancient oaks that towered over me like silent sentinels. The morning mist hadn't lifted. Instead, it thickened, curling around the roots and rocks like smoke. I was panicked but trained enough to try and remain calm. I listened for sounds, birds, animals, any sign of life, but there was nothing. Silence had weight in those woods, a tangible presence pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. That's when I noticed it, footprints freshly pressed into the mud. Small, barefoot, humanoid, but not like a human should be. They weren't random, they circled my path, always just ahead of me, always returning to where I stood. I tried calling out, my voice cracking. Hello? Anyone there? Nothing. The forest seemed to swallow my words. I ran blindly, branches tearing at my clothes, roots snatching at my boots. And then I saw them, figures more than one, pale and thin, lurking just beyond the tree line. Not moving the way people move. Their heads tilted, bodies bending unnaturally, limbs stretching in ways that made my stomach twist. I froze. My training told me to observe, to plan, but fear had taken over. I stumbled over a root and fell hard. My flashlight rolled out of reach, leaving me in darkness. I crawled to it, my hands shaking, and when I reached it, the beam cut through the fog. What I saw made me wish I had never moved that day. A clearing appeared, one I hadn't seen before. And there, in the center, stood a figure taller than any human should be. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes. I can't even describe the eyes. Hollow, endless, watching me, waiting. The figures I had glimpsed earlier melted from the shadows and surrounded me silently, slowly, their movement impossible, fluid, like water flowing through the trees. I screamed. The sound bounced back at me, distorted, mocking. And then came the whispers. Hundreds of them, circling my head, repeating my name in tones that were sometimes pleading, sometimes angry, sometimes filled with a hunger I cannot describe. I tried to cover my ears, tried to run again, but my legs wouldn't respond. It was as if the forest itself had rooted me in place. One of the figures stepped forward. Its hand was skeletal, fingers long enough to wrap around my head. I can still feel the cold that ran through my veins the moment it touched my hair. Then everything went black. I woke up in the hospital 2 weeks later. Or so I was told. I cannot remember being brought here. My body refused to move from the neck down. Doctors were baffled. No head trauma. No broken bones. My spinal cord was fine. They could not explain it. Yet here I was, trapped in my own body, fully conscious, able to speak only through slight movements of my jaw. My hands, my legs, useless. I am alive, but I am no longer whole. The memories of the forest never left me. I could see the clearing, the mound of dirt, the figure's hollow eyes in my mind whenever I closed my own. And then came the whispers, not in the forest this time, but here. At night, in the hospital, I hear them. Outside my window, brushing against the building, barely audible but unmistakable. Calling my name. I try to tell the nurses, the doctors, anyone who will listen, but they either don't hear or refuse to believe me. I had to learn to cope. My old job returned to me after the incident. They considered my experience a medical leave. Paperwork, evaluations, simple administrative tasks. I could do them. But every day I am reminded of that clearing. Every day the feeling of being watched, the sensation that the forest has followed me, grows stronger. Sometimes I can sense it near my bed at night. Shadows move across the walls that shouldn't be there. The air thickens, heavy with the smell of wet pine and soil. And in the distance, faint but deliberate, footsteps echo in the hallways, though I live alone. I can no longer walk, but I can see. I can hear. I can think. And I remember everything. I remember how it felt to be rooted to the earth, unable to escape, staring at those hollow eyes, listening to voices that were mine, yet not mine. I remember the breath of the forest, the way it seemed to inhale and exhale as if alive, sentient, hungry. Doctors said my paralysis was neurological, unexplained. My family calls it a miracle I survived. But I know the truth. The forest, it chose me. Or maybe I chose it, though I do not remember. Every night, when the hospital is silent, I feel its presence lingering at my window. Waiting. Patient. The whispers continue. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I hear them moving inside my room, brushing against the walls, circling my bed, watching. I am Anthony, once a forest ranger, now a prisoner in my own body. And I want you to believe me when I say this. Some places in the woods are not just abandoned, they are alive. They remember. They wait. And whatever I saw that night, whatever touched me, it has not released me. There is no closure. There is no escape. And if you ever wander too deep into a forest that isn't meant for you, you may find, like I did, that leaving is only the beginning of the terror. Some forests aren't just quiet, they're alive. And some stories, they don't end when the lights come back on. Anthony's tale is proof that certain places are better left unexplored, and some horrors follow you long after you've left. Keep your lights on tonight and remember, some dread never leaves. If you were alone in those woods, would you dare to keep walking, or would you turn back immediately? Do you believe some places can remember us, like Anthony said? Have you ever felt watched when you were completely alone? What do you think really happened in that clearing? Was it human, or something else? If this story sent shivers down your spine, hit like to show you survived it. Subscribe to Do of Dread and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that will haunt you. Comment below with your thoughts. What would you have done if you were Anthony trapped in those woods? Remember, the dread doesn't end here, it's waiting for you.